So we are learning the halachot of Rabbi Yosef Mishash, one of the greatest scholars of Moroccan Jewry, of all Sephardic Jewry, and actually should be really the one that everybody follows. And we spoke about it before. It was a rabbi in Meknes, and then he came to Haifa in 1969. It was until the mid-1970s. He was the chief Sephardic rabbi of Haifa. And the importance of his writings is he really represents the true Sephardic Hachamim of antiquity. The people that understood, the rabbis who understood the people. Like we say, they taught Torah and Halakha for the people and with the people and not against them. Not trying to impose on them, but rather to see what are the problems, what is it they need. So everything is comprehensive. When you look at the question of Halakha, you look at all facets, all aspects, not just the dry text of the law, what it says. So he says here, he writes an answer to a rabbi from Tripoli in Libya that visited Algeria, where the Rabbi Meshash was the rabbi in Tlemcen in Algeria. This is Rabbi Yosef Gabay, and he says this: you asked me, which is not just asking. He says, Midat adina kasha muthim. Like this rabbi came really strongly against Rabbi Meshash for ala minag pashut ben hamizrahim shen hozrim atfila lo b'shachrit velo binha lo b'musafei shabbatot u'mu'adim ve'rashei rahim. Says the widespread minhag among the Eastern Jews. So what the Eastern Jews are the Jews of Algeria compared to the Jews of Morocco, which is considered Maghreb, right? North Africa is called the Maghreb, the West, and and Algeria was the East. Anyway, so he explains that. It's an interesting question. What was the question? Why the Jews of Algeria do not repeat the Amidah? Right? If you go to the synagogue, most Orthodox synagogues, we have the repetition of the Amidah. The Hazan goes up, reads the Amidah, and then the repetition, right? And as it sounds, repetition sometimes is repetitious. It's like, okay, I just read the whole thing. Why do we need to read it again? So there are some additions. You do Birkat Kohanim, you do Kedusha, but it seems like a burden. In many cases, when the Hazan repeats the Amidah, people are talking, checking messages, and and other things, etc. So it seems a little cumbersome. So why do we do that? So he says first, let us explain why do we even repeat the Amidah to begin with? And he says, Yadua lifnei kisei kavod kol ba'al hora'ah the tam takanat Hazara לחזור עד שעת התפילה הוא כדי להוציא את מי שאינו בקיא. So the reason the rabbis instituted that idea of repeating the Amidah is for those people who don't know how to pray. להוציא את מי שאינו בקיא. So it's in order to so if you don't know, in antiquity, not everybody had a siddur. Today we are used, there's so many siddurim that you don't know which one to use. They have, competing editions, and the siddurim, some siddurim are so heavy you can't even hold them. But in antiquity, people didn't have a siddur. You had one siddur per synagogue sometimes, or if you were wealthy, you could afford it, you would have someone copy your own siddur. That's, by the way, the reason why you have the big siddurim with a very large print for the Hazan, is because in some synagogues and some communities, especially in Europe, in Germany, in the medieval times, they couldn't afford to copy siddurim for everyone, so they would make one very large print siddur, and everybody would stand around the Hazan and read with him. So and he quotes the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Karo, who says, "Kahal sheitpalelu וכולם בקיאים בתפילה, אף על פי כן ירד השליח ציבור וחוזר להתפלל כדי לקיים תקנת חכמים." It says, if the community prayed, and even though everybody knows the tefillah, still the Hazan repeats the Amidah. So why do we do that? It says, להוציא מלב האומרים, עכשיו שהכל בקיאים להתפלל, נבטל חזרת התפילות. This is a classic example of what happens with halakha, what happens with Jewish law, but what happens with any legal proceedings in general. Once you put something in place, it's very hard to take it out. Once a certain halacha or law was established, and you start doing it, and now you try to remove it, you say, no, how we've been doing it for years. And there are many stories about that. Sometimes it's a minhag that starts with no basis originally, and even so, people can't change it. One of the most famous cases was in a synagogue in Prague called Altnoi Shul, or the old new shul, Altnoi, the old new synagogue, where people used to go when they go around the teva to do akafot or simchat Torah. So they go around the teva, and also when they would take the Sefer Torah, when they get to a certain place in the synagogue, everybody bows down. They all bow their hand and they keep walking, and then they raise their heads. And the rabbis who was visiting, he asked them, "Why are you doing that?" He says, "No, we've been doing it, for centuries. Our fathers, our forefathers, and so on and so forth." But he didn't come there. He wanted to know what is the. He looked at all the books. There's no explanation for that. Finally, he found one of the elders who remembered from his grandfather what was in the synagogue before. He said, the name of the synagogue is the Old New Synagogue, because it was very old, and then we renovated it. And before we renovated it, there was a supportive beam that ran through the side of the synagogue. And whenever you get there, you have to bow down. Now the beam is gone, but the minhag remains. But this is even something that started without basis, right? You can't change. It's even more so when originally it had a reason. Originally, people didn't know how to say the tefillah by heart, so the Hazan would repeat it for them. Now that everybody knows the Amidah, why would you have to repeat it for them? So this is really a major debate, not only about the Hazara, about many halachot that were established for a certain purpose in a certain time, and now reality has changed. And this is a constant. There's a constant. I could say debate, argument, disagreements between rabbis. And what in the Ashkenazi world would happen with that is anyone who said, I need to update the halacha towards this direction, they labeled him, or you're a reform, conservative, non-orthodox, and they pushed them out. And among the Sephardi community, it didn't happen. But what happened among the Sephardim is that officially the leadership remained sort of orthodox, and the people did what they wanted, more or less. But even that, creates problems, because it's incumbent upon the rabbis, as the religious leadership, to provide a solution which is equal for all, and not just say, officially we do this, but you do whatever you want. So one example that we have today, in modern times, and there could be many examples. One example is that more applies to Ashkenazi community, is not eating kitniot on Pesach, not eating legumes, which is they don't eat rice, beans, green peas, everything, right? So among Moroccans also, some Moroccans don't eat rice on Pesach. Who eats? You eat rice on Pesach?
We don't.
You don't eat rice.
I don't understand why you suggest that we don't eat green beans.
No, I don't suggest that. I didn't say that.
No.
I said Ashkenazim don't eat.
Yeah, but why they do?
Oh, okay, good. Because
it's a green vegetarian.
I know, but they just to be safe. Okay, it started with.
We eat fava beans.
We eat also fava beans, of course. But what they started with certain grains that were that people made flour from, millet and other things, and they said, we don't want you to confuse this flour with this flour. In the next generation, they said, it means every little grain is forbidden, so it applies to all little dry grains. Then they said everything which is small or everything which is round, we can't eat. And then they extended it. And they came to America. Some rabbis who came from Europe just after the war and didn't know the local fruits or tropical fruits. There was a rabbi was asked, could you eat bananas on Pesach? He said, here, what is a banana? Show me the fruit. I don't know what it is. You can't eat it. They don't eat bananas on Pesach.
Because you don't know.
Because he doesn't know. Right. The reason people didn't eat rice in Morocco, there are two reasons. One, because they used to carry ship the rice in big sacks, next to sugar and flour and all that. You know, like in the old days when you go to the store and you get it with the, by weight, by measure. So sometimes the rice and flour would mix together, so they don't want to touch it. That's the one. But I think there's a much deeper reason than that. Moroccans don't like rice that much. True?
My father loves
Not that much.
In general, it was
between not the main
staple.
between skshu and rice, right? Couscous and rice. Couscous is I know because I'm Iraqi. My wife is Moroccan. When we got married, my wife, she goes, "What is with you and rice? What's your problem?" Like every day, it's like bread. You put rice in pita and sprinkle some rice on top.
Right.
What is it? Meanwhile, my mother-in-law, when she cooked rice once a couple of months, she was so happy that they came one, right? So there are two reasons. It wasn't that important. If you say you have to give it up for a week, okay. The same thing with Ashkenazim, like because they didn't have certain grains, right? And you said you could give it up for a week. We don't eat anyway. We eat potatoes more than the interesting thing for Ashkenazim that eat potatoes, right, on Pesach, that potatoes only came to the old world after Columbus discovered America. They didn't have potatoes before that. Right. So what did they eat before that? They really had very few things to eat. Terfas. Yeah. So anyway, so this
Isn't that the same problem that we have with, for instance, chicken and dairy?
And dairy, it's not at the same magnitude because it started earlier, but it's of the same concept because at a certain point, the rabbi said, okay, we're going to forbid the consumption of chicken with dairy. That was at around the 3rd century. So it's a little, in time, in terms,
logic is
right?
You don't want to eat
right.
No,
so in terms,
it's logical because we don't eat meat with the dairy,
right?
Because we don't want to eat the veal with the blood,
right?
The milk of the
right. But in terms of
the chicken has nothing to do with it.
Right, exactly. So in terms of what he's asking is this: in terms of time, when you go back, if you say the prohibition or the minhag practice started in the 13th, 14th century. That's where you had Sephardim in one side of the world, and they were the majority, and Ashkenazim in the other side of the world. So those people follow it, those people don't follow it. When they all come together, right, and they say, well, you eat rice on Pesach? Oh, it's okay. So they think they consider maybe we could do it, right? I once went with my kids, we lived in Brooklyn, we went to the Bronx Zoo on Pesach, and my wife packed for them food, and of course, you go on so she got corn on the cob. My son walks around eating the corn, and an Ashkenazi, like a frum, Orthodox lady, tells him, looks at him, he told us, she says, it's so strange to see someone eating corn on Pesach. So he said, he was 13 years old. He said, well, it's not forbidden for them, yes. For Ashkenazim, yes. So he said, I wanted to tell her back, it's so strange to see someone not eating corn on Pesach. But he says he was too polite. He didn't want to say that. So that's with kitniot. But when you go with your question, which is chicken and dairy, this started 1,700 years ago. Wow. When they lived in Israel, everybody more or less in the same place. And it was widespread. So now everybody does that. The question is, I would say, is this. You have people who want to keep kosher, but up to a certain limit, right? Mm-hmm. And they say, I accept what the Torah said, but do I need to go more than that? And then here's the question.
I want to stop at the ham and cheese.
Right.
No?
Right. Exactly. No, it's not. It's not. When you look at what people observe, in terms of kashrut, for example. It doesn't matter whether they came from a kosher home, not kosher home. For many Jews, traditional Jews, that kosher stops at ham, meaning that they would eat out meat, everything, even seafood, but not ham. This is like pork is out of the question. For others, seafood also is not that. Other will say, I will eat chicken out, but not beef out. So the question is, where do you stop? But here's the thing: the rabbis themselves in the Gemara, in the Talmud, in the Mishnah, those who wrote the halachot, admitted that chicken with dairy is not forbidden. So, do you tell people, let's, lift up that ban and let people have that? We make Judaism more comfortable for them, or we insist, for for the full thing. So experience proves that insisting on the full acceptance of all the traditions doesn't work, because you look today at Judaism and maybe 10% consider themselves to be fully Orthodox or fully observant. On the other hand, when you come to change that, then what happens is that the more vocal and extreme factions of the religious leadership will come after you and say, this is heresy, if you do that, everything will fall apart. So that's a very, very fine line to walk. Yeah, and that's why you don't envy the work of rabbis.
Well, it's very interesting because it seems, it's the whole talk of how conservative Judaism is ending.
Yeah.
Because people are either going reform or they're going fully Orthodox.
Right.
Because they can't find the middle ground.
Right. So what they pull. Right.
The meat is white, the blood, there is no blood running.
No, you're right. It's not a mammal.
It looks more like fish than like meat.
Right. The original logic of the rabbis was, don't eat chicken with milk, because you are going to confuse chicken with beef and eat beef with dairy.
If they leave that you would eat chicken with meat, people will eat meat with
dairy. Yeah,
with
just
dairy.
another layer of safeguard.
Right. But the problem is, that sometimes you put so many safeguards, right, that the system doesn't work anymore. Mm-hmm. Right? So let's say, for an example, let's make it an analogy. Okay, let's say you have a site where there's radiation, right? Nuclear waste, right? So you put safeguards all around it, right? And you say, if you pass this fence, you're going to die, immediate death. Okay, a person cuts the first fence and goes through, nothing happens. He say they're liars. He cuts another fence, nothing happens. Eventually, when he reaches like the reactor itself, that's it. It's too late. Right? But if you tell people, if you at least explain, says this is safeguard number 7, if you breach that, things might happen, right? Or we give another example. Let's say, I would say that the Torah is like a cure for the problems of life. Life have a lot of enticements and other problems that could cause people to veer off course of anything. So, like pitfalls that people describe. So let's say, in a certain place there's a swimming pool, people fall into and drown. So the city decided to protect people, so they put a fence around it. And still people cut the fence and go in and drown, and they put another fence, and still people cut all the fences and get into the pool and drown. So what is the solution? The solution is to teach people to swim. Teach them how to swim. Yes. So the thing is that the Torah, that a lot of rabbis see the world is like a swimming pool, right? So a lot of rabbis look at it as a threat. You go into it, you're going to drown, because you're going to be pulled by this and that and a million other things. Instead, the Torah is supposed to give you the skills to swim through that swimming pool, to use whatever it is. You could be successful in anything you take on life. You could be anything and still be an observant Jew. But unfortunately, we created this divide. You think today, okay, it's rare to see. You see doctors and lawyers as Orthodox Jews. But what else do you see in America? What is the profession of an Orthodox Jew? Very limited, right? There be in education. Right? I brought here to the Talmud Torah a couple of weeks ago.
A lot of them sell electronics.
Right? So a couple of weeks ago, I brought to the Talmud Torah one of the congregates who actually was my student in Bogota. He was when I taught there in high school, but 20 years ago he was in elementary school. Then they moved to America, and he decided to join the American Army because he felt that America gave him a lot, and he became more observant in the Army, and he went to West Point. He graduated at West Point. So I said, okay, it's a nice thing. I brought an officer, and who started like them, in a regular school, and became observant, and he serves in the Army. And he said he was the only one in his class. He said, wouldn't it be better if you had more Orthodox Jews joining the American Army and making a difference from within, or more in anything in politics? Well, you don't see Orthodox Jews in politics except for a couple of askanim, what they call, lobbyists. I mean, they have a senator.
Right.
You have one senator, you have one congressman, but they don't represent really Jews, Orthodox Jews, as they are in America. So this is the problem, that the mentality of Orthodox Judaism is create a divide. Religion on one side, life on the other side. And they never teach people how to swim, how to have the skills, right? Instead, just creating the fence. So part of what rabbi-messas did was really dismantling some of the fences and telling people this is how you have to take the Torah and imbue life with it, so you live a more meaningful life.